Good evening and a warm welcome to all of you to today's session. This session is organized by the Center for Management Communication in association with VISTA 2022, the annual business fest of IIM Bangalore. It is also the first sustainability series organized by the Center for Management Communication and a part of the International Sustainability Challenge organized by VISTA. It is my great pleasure to introduce you our esteemed set of panels for today's discussion. We have with us Dr. Sumitra Chowdhury, Ms. Namrata Rana, and Ms. Prerna Wadikar. Dr. Sumitra Chowdhury is the Director in the Department of Economic Affairs, Ministry of Finance. Dr. Chowdhury engages with the financial sector regulators in India and with the International Financial Stability Board to coordinate global and domestic financial sector reforms, preventing financial instability and to work towards achieving the goals of financial sector development. She has multiple experiences of engaging with foreign governments and multilateral institutions, as well as with the grassroots level institutions and people of India. Her interest in climate risks on the financial sector will see her bringing in her perspective into the discussion. Second up, we have Ms. Namrata Rana. Namrata, she's Director Strategy and Brand at Futurescape. She helps companies and institutions build sustainable experiences. Her work focuses on building ESG strategy and transformation through sustainability journey mapping. She has worked in the areas of retail, healthcare, mobility, food, hospitality, green jobs, and infrastructure. She also writes extensively in various publications. Next up, we have Ms. Prerna Wadikar. She is CEO at Action for India. She has a diverse profile spanning over a decade across multinationals, government, and social enterprises. She's a Weidenfeld, Oxford, Hoffman, Lincoln, and Sage Scholar and recipient of the Vice Chancellor's Impact Award at the University of Oxford. She holds a Master's in Public Policy from IIM Bangalore and MBA from the University of Oxford. Today's session will be moderated by Professor Deepti Ganapathy from IIM Bangalore. Professor Deepti is Chair, Center for Management Communication and faculty in the area of communication at the Indian Institute of Management, Bangalore. Her recent book, Media and Climate Change, Making Sense of Press Narratives, has been generating a lot of interest. She has given talks about her book in the US, UK, and India to practitioners, scholars, and general audience. She's a Rotary Group Study Exchange Fellow, CNN Young Journalist Finalist, Creative Writing Awardee by Royal Commonwealth Society, London, East-West Centre alumni, and recognized by the International Journalists Network as Journalist of the Month. She holds a PhD in Digital Communication from the Department of Studies in Communication and Journalism, University of Mysore, and was a visiting faculty at UC San Diego. Professor Deepti has 17 years of practitioner and academic experience with India's leading media and education conglomerates. Her interest in the field of sustainability and communication is apparent through her case studies and writings for the popular press on this topic, as well as open programs offered through IIMB Executive Education Program. Without any delay, I would like to hand over to Professor Deepti. Over to you, ma'am.
Thank you, Shivam, for the introductions, and congratulations to you and your team for such a fantastic response for the first ever global International Sustainability Case Challenge contest. The Center for Management Communication is very proud to have its first speaker series in collaboration with VISTA Sustainability Challenge, which has attracted participants from more than 20 foreign universities and secured more than 3,000 registrations. We are also honored to have with us today a very distinguished panel that will cover this interesting topic that we have set for this panel discussion, which is how do future business leaders negotiate sustainability from the perspective of the government, the private sector, and the not-for-profit sector. Before we begin, I would like to do some quick housekeeping and inform our viewers about the flow of this panel for the next 60 minutes. To start with, I will invite each of our panelists to make opening remarks for around 5 minutes each, after which we will have another round of questions, which are pre-decided. We have had a lot of discussions with our panelists to ensure that we cover most of the topics or the questions that we have also received through the registrations itself. And after which we will take questions from the participants. So please keep your questions coming on the chat as well, and we will moderate those questions. So without further ado, I now hand it over to Dr. Sumitra to make her opening remarks.
Okay, thank you, Professor Deepti and all my co-panelists, and especially IIM Bangalore. This is the most important topic of the day, and it is very contextual that you have organized this discussion with the students, and that too from all over the world. I am really very happy to know about it. So without making much introduction, I would just like to make, first of all, I'll tell what exactly I do so that you can understand my perspective. What I do here is in the Ministry of Finance, we deal with financial sector stability issues, and climate actually poses a lot of risk. Everyone is, they are actually saying that it will have implications on climate. Climate change will have huge implications for the financial sector, but so far no data has been captured. So the thing is how business leaders will negotiate. First of all, everyone, all of us have to be committed to sustainability. That is the first requirement according to me. Once we are committed, not only the business leaders, all the leaders and general people, community, everyone has to be very committed. That's the first thing. Second thing is that every country has made certain commitments to net zero. So if an industry belongs to a particular country, it has to ensure that the plan of the individual industry has to match with the net zero target for that country. Third thing which has to be understood is that climate change is actually, posing both challenges as well as opportunities. So certain industries will have certain opportunities and others may have more challenges than opportunities. So, and these challenges and opportunities will differ from one country or one sector to another sector. So this needs also to be understood. And third, this will be fourth rather, I will think that there are a lot of initiatives which are being taken by various organizations across the world to make disclosures. And so every company should commit to disclose. They should be able to disclose their commitment and what they have been able to come up to. That has to come. So disclosure is another requirement. And above all, I think while they will negotiate, they will have to engage in a lot of research. What all is going on to understand the context, what it implies for that particular sector and the industry, that they will have to do. And they have to be very open-minded to recalibrate themselves. So it will take time, but industries or business leaders will have to be open-minded about recalibrating their strategy, their approach, the selection of resources, materials, markets, everything maybe. And then, as I have already said, one has to report, that disclosure report, one should be open-minded, and given the context, everybody has to commit also to make available necessary information and data. Once data is available, only then all of us or anybody who wants to contribute will be able to exactly say how much we can contribute, how we can change. So I'll not take much time in the initial remarks. I'll give chances to others. I'll be very interested in knowing from the private sector representatives here, because we are also learning a lot from them. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sumitra. That was a very nice overview that you gave us. I'll now hand it over to Namrata Rana, and then we'll take it up from there.
Thank you so much, Deepti. Lovely to hear from you, Dr. Sumitra. And all the students here, I want to ask you, why do you think we are all studying sustainability? Why is such a fuss being made about it in a business school, right? What does sustainability have to do with selling products and services or running companies? Isn't that the job of scientists? Isn't that the job of experts who need to understand the climate and figure that out, right? Those are the kind of questions that a lot of people ask me, saying that, why should we study all these things? But I have one answer for you, that climate change is all about you and me. It's about our lifestyles, right? Climate change is all about the products that we buy and the services that we consume. So what Dr. Sumitra is saying, that companies will have to gear up, but how will they gear up? They're going to design low carbon products. They're going to design regenerative practices and services so that we do not destroy the environment in our quest for growth. So is growth going to die away? Not really. But growth will transform. How we measure things will transform. How we talk about GDP will transform. How we actually report things within our companies is already transforming. So if you just look 10 years back, everybody used to just report on the amount of products that were sold and the input prices, the cost of making those products, right? But now we are talking about how much water is used. What is the GHG intensity per unit of revenue that is generated? These are metrics that were not heard of earlier, or even if they were heard of, it was considered too far-fetched for companies to report on it. But these are things that are coming into practice. So I want all of you to listen, and to listen carefully, and to figure out what role you're going to play in this transition, how your jobs are going to change, which is why you need to learn, you need to understand, and you need to practice sustainability. Thank you. Over to you, Deepti.
Yeah, thank you, Namrata. That was a very interesting perspective of jumping right into, asking the audience, how are they going to grapple with these issues, since it's going to be thrown at them, right? So we'll ask Prerna to give her opening remarks before we dive into these questions further. Prerna, over to you.
Thank you so much, Deepti. And this is a very difficult task to follow after two amazing intellectual women and their opening remarks. So I'll try to continue from where they left. And since this is a business school and we typically are taught about the top line and bottom line and everything ends with profitability, the question that we probably should be asking is it profit if it is profit produced or created at the cost of others? Or is it merely transfer of wealth from the poor to the wealthier? Is that what we define as profits? And how do we measure profit? It's something that was very briefly touched by Namrata, but what are the parameters which clearly allow us to address what profitability means to us as an individual and us as an organization that we work for? You go one step deeper. And you start asking the more serious questions, that how does the climate problem get addressed by us as an individual and us as an organization? And how do we fix those problems that are inherent to our systems without shifting the problem somewhere else? And what I mean by this is, are we becoming green at the cost of polluting other countries or other sectors or other geographies or other aspects of our environment? And is green only the answer, or we also should look at the holistic development of us as a society and not just a climate impact? So I leave this, my opening remarks with a whole bunch of questions, and I'm sure in the course of our discussion, we will have answers to those.
Thank you, Prerna, for those remarks. Namrata, I'm going to hand it over to you again, because you talked about, this aspect of where do our, graduating students find these jobs, and even when they find these jobs, how is the future going to look for them? Because they are going to get into a scenario where, things are going to be a lot more challenging for them, but there are opportunities as well. So we are trying to push them into all these aspects of, ESG reporting, frameworks, metrics that you brought up. And so how are these going to, make them thrive in spite of these challenges? So how do you foresee the job scenario for them?
See, my view is that we are in the biggest transition of our times. This is the biggest shift that has been made since the Industrial Revolution. And why is that? Because the energy system that drives everything is changing. And secondly, the financial system that supports everything else is also changing. So at one level, you have massive forces of change that the financial system and then the energy system are driving across industry after industry after industry. And that's not it. Because of all this and the awareness that climate change is bringing, consumer behavior and consumer habits are changing, right? So if you look at the stakeholders that are impacted by this, it's pretty much everybody all across the world, as individuals, as companies, as governments, as all stakeholders, as suppliers of products and suppliers of materials, right? So it's everybody in the ecosystem. So where does that leave a new MBA student? That leaves a new MBA student with a lot of opportunity, because you're here at IIM Bangalore and in all the other educational institutions that you represent, because you were able to break down problems and find solutions, right? That's what we are taught in an MBA school, in a business school. What's a case study? A case study is a problem. And from that case study, you're supposed to figure out how is it that I can apply things that I have been taught, or how is it that I can apply new things that are emerging to solve those problems. So having a problem-solving perspective will help you drive innovation, jobs, and tremendous opportunity. But what we also need to be aware of is the fact that how is industry after industry transforming? So it's not just automotives that are talking about electrical vehicles. The food industry is transforming because people are talking about meatless meat, say for example, right? Plant-based foods. They're talking about organic farming, or farming that is going to utilize very little resources and is going to be regenerative in nature. They're also talking about localization. So everybody's saying no matter how much you produce, and how well you produce it with a low carbon footprint, if you start shipping things around, nothing can ever be net zero, right? So what it means is localization. So there is a big thrust all over the world, and that is by geopolitical reasons as well, on localization. How is it that you can manufacture products and services on demand within 20 kilometers of the customer? So can you grow food within a certain kilometer radius of where your customers exist? Can you actually supply garments like that? And where does that leave technologies like 3D printing? So at one level, this is a problem that consists of people-related issues. So where will be the jobs of the future? It's about transforming processes, and it is harnessing the technologies of the future to solve these problems. So I would say that there is tremendous opportunity, and it's likely to be a very, very exciting next 10 to 20 years.
Thank you, Namrata. I like that statement, the biggest transition of our times. And I think that's where, there is this potential for our future business leaders to carve out a niche and, make their mark during this transition phase. Dr. Sumitra, the next question I directed to you. So you talked about these climate-related risks and how it may impact the financial sector. So can you tell us what initiatives have been taken globally and in India to deal with such risks? For example, the CBAM. So has any assessment been made of the risks that may impact the financial sector? What is your understanding of this?
Very interesting question, and it is really a good question, because this is what everybody is grappling with, in fact. So the status as of now is that a lot of institutions, international as well as at the national level, They are trying to understand, what exactly would be the impact. Though there is an understanding that it is going to have a huge impact on industry, on financial sector, on everything. But when you want to assess how much would be the exact impact, there is no measurement. The reason being, there is no data from which you can exactly measure due to how much climate change, what has happened. So that data right now, actually, the attempt is being made basically to collect those data. And if you wish to collect that data, it is not going to happen overnight. So consistently, industry, everybody has to come forward who are engaged in this small or big or multinational organizations. Everybody has to come forward and give the information which is required. Now, again, there is this, what kind of information is required on that. Also, there is no agreement till now. If you see a lot of, as I mentioned, that there are many industries or many organizations which are working on it, but everybody has a different approach. Most of them have a different approach, but they are somehow coming up. Somebody is trying to come up with a survey through which required information can be collected. Somebody is coming up with a regulation. Many countries are trying to introduce regulation. There are some, I think later on it will come up, those ESG framework and other framework, a lot of frameworks have come up, but there is no uniform framework from which you can actually assess. So countries are also doing, kind of scenario analysis, that if the climate will be like 2%, 2 degrees Celsius, or it is 1.5 degrees Celsius or 3 degrees Celsius, what would be the impact? Because you do not have the ready-made data, but you can simulate. So once you simulate, then you try to, figure out how much difference it will be. So that is how the impact is being approached. As of now, I really tried at my level. I would be very happy to learn from the co-panelists here, whether if they have come across, even Professor Deepti, you have also come up with a book. Maybe you would be able to, enlighten us a little bit about whether there has been an impact study where exactly this impact of the climate change could be assessed by any institution, by individual or someone. That will be of, I think even the students will be benefited a lot from that, because it has a lot of research value as well as practical value.
Right.
Yes. So this is how we should be looking at it. There are this physical risk, which can be acute risk, and there can be, kind of consistent risk, which is a chronic kind of a risk. And so implication of immediate physical risk will be different, and chronic risk will have again different. And as Ms. Namrata has already said, the transition will also pose a lot of differential things, like there will be change in the technology. There will be huge shift in the technology, and there will be scope for innovation therein, which she has already mentioned. But this technology shift also will put certain businesses out of place. So that is also the aspect which one has to come up with and see the innovation, how innovation can address those, how gradually that shift can be made. And there are a lot of scope in that, actually. Apart from that, behavioral change, yes, of course, there are a lot of behavioral change already. A few years back, we were all using a different kind of bulb. Now everybody is using LED to save energy. We are all looking forward to, electric vehicle. So electric vehicle, I think India has already committed by 2030 will, petrol-driven cars will be out of road. I think US also has made certain commitments like that. Most of the countries are making those commitments. So there are things which are happening. Along with this, there will be some regulatory and policy changes. So industries will have an additional responsibility to comply with the policy changes. So maybe if you leave it to the industry, they will work it out differently. Maybe somebody will have their own phases. But if there is a sudden regulatory change or policy change, which is actually required also, then industry may have to pull up and do it faster, or maybe slower, depending on the country in which they're living, how their country has committed to the net zero. That is what it would be like. So yeah, so I'll just hand over to you again. Maybe we'll talk up. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you. So I think, the last few sentences that you mentioned, I'm just going to use that as a quick transition to ask Prerna the question about the challenges around sustainable business models, right? So if everybody wants to be going the sustainability way, so and coming up with these sustainable business models and pitching for these and saying that, yes, we've figured out the math, we know how to have sustainable businesses running and going, but what are the challenges that you see in these business models?
So Deepti, I think it all goes back to what are the kind of climate risks that we face as a nation and as a world. Dr. Sumitra has beautifully covered all of them: the physical risk, the transition risk, and more importantly, the liability risk, where our financial liabilities to insurance providers is increasing because of climatic events, and the costs of premium are increasing. And what that means is the entire energy transition. We go back to the debate or the dialogue of climate justice, where we are not responsible for what we are suffering, but yet we have to pay a higher cost for everything else. And like Namrata said, there is a whole transition in the way the economy is moving. So if I look at sustainable business models, government has already declared that by 2030, we will go completely electric on the mobility spectrum. What about the charging ecosystem? What about the climate adaptability? What about the adaptability to different traffic and different modes of transport? Government has not really come up with a sustainable plan to ensure that our public transport will also be green. And recently, I was talking to a battery scientist, a lithium-ion battery scientist, where he said one of the state governments has given a bulk order for green buses, but depending on which road the bus takes and what is the traffic incident on those roads and what is the possibility of the passengers boarding those bus on those routes, the life of that bus will depend and will vary. So some could probably live 2 years, but some could live 5 years, and some could not be usable beyond 1 year. So does the government have that kind of a planning? And what happens to those, the investment that the government has made in such public transport? It's coming back very specifically to your sustainability business models questions. First is the technology is very new, very nascent. People are still experimenting. And there is no maturity in the adaptation. Neither are there standards and frameworks where we say this is ISI certified product, and hence everyone knows it is safe to use. We do not have an ISI certified electric vehicle, for example, or an equivalent standard. So that is one. The second is the gap, the gender gap that we see in sustainability space as well. So sustainability is associated with femininity, and hence they are expected to adapt sustainable products. A lot of products are designed and marketed to women and for women. And what that means is 50% of the world's population is alienated or not completely bought into the sustainability spectrum as consumers, and probably also as producers. The third part is our access to information. And what I mean by that is, how do we know that this is really green, this is really sustainable? And how do I know that this is available at such and such place? So one is on the access to information in terms of the credibility of the product or the service. The second is access to information of the availability and access to the product of the service. And these are some major challenges which different businesses face. Fourth, and I think this is where regulatory spectrum also overlaps in the business model, is the different policies that the government is coming up with. An example is the extended producer responsibility, where the producers are responsible for the plastic waste for small and medium enterprises. But how does the producer know which of his customers are small and medium, and what is the spectrum of consumption of those organizations, and to what extent is he or she responsible for managing of the plastic waste? That part is not clear. So we have policies, but we don't have policies which are complete, and we don't have policies which are implementable to 100% degree and measurable. So those are 4 major challenges in the sustainable business models.
Thank you, Prerna. I'm glad you covered the gender, perspective as well, because there was a question from one of our participants, and the question was, is there any gender difference between how men and women approach sustainability in business? And your perspective really, showed that the association, how the gender is perceived, and how that association happens with the term itself. So I think with this round of questions, the panelists have gone into adequate depth. Now we are getting a lot of questions on the chat window from our participants. So if the panelists want to pick up any of the questions that they can see, please let me know. Otherwise, I can direct the questions to you. So if you can see the questions, and if you would like to take any of the questions, please go for it. Otherwise, I would read out the questions, because some of the questions have come directly to me as well. Anybody? Are you able to see the questions, Namrata and Prerna?
Yeah, I want to take the question on organic farming. So,
okay.
And I want to address that to see organic farming, like everything else, is a process of doing a certain thing which needs a business model or an economic model behind it. Just as in my previous comments, I mentioned 3D manufacturing and localization, that in as well as plant-based foods or anything for that matter, any kind of innovation, whether in process, whether in technology, or the new materials that are coming up that are likely to replace plastics and many other different kinds of things, those need business and economic models. And that's the kind of work that needs to be done now, which I think is well in the domain of MBA students. So if you think that somebody made a mistake in launching a particular thing, then it's up to you to go and solve it.
Right. And there's also this question about how should traditional companies which have deployed huge capital in traditional sources of energy respond to these ever-changing norms? Namrata, would you like to take that again?
So, see, the energy transition is a big one. So, at one level, last decade was really all about switching to renewables. So, a large number of organizations have looked at, and we do a study on this, so you can go to the Futurescape website and you can see the India's top companies for sustainability rankings that are there, as well as details on how companies are shifting and how they are participating in the energy transition. But moreover, what I want to just say is that the energy transition has many aspects. So a company needs to look at all those aspects. The first one is, how do I optimize energy? How do I actually build an energy efficiency within my organization? And believe you me, research after research actually says that 30% of the energy in most organizations, offices, homes is actually wasted. So we can do a lot. The second bit is that how do you switch to renewables? The third bit is, how do we look at new opportunities and new innovations? So people are realizing that simply switching to renewables and simply optimizing will only take us so far. We need new forms of energy. So a lot of experimentation, investments is going into hydrogen. People are also saying that how can we do different kinds of innovative things, say waste management, better management of waste, so that one person's waste is another company's resource, and therefore utilization within a circular system to prevent a lot of wastage of resources and energy and everything else all around it. So I think the opportunity lies in looking at the energy transition for sectorally, in the context of a company and in the context of innovation as well. So there's no easy answer to say that this is the way to do it, but I guess people are experimenting and finding their feet in this.
Thank you, Namrata. Prerna, yes, there was this question, if sustainability undermines the company's competitiveness, how to convince the stakeholders to fight for it?
I would disagree that sustainability undermines a company's competitiveness. On the other hand, it gives the company a unique edge to position itself among its competitors. And the reason being, like I think Namrata covered, that it's not just about transitioning to net zero, it's about relooking at your company, its systems, its processes. A core aspect of company's ESG evaluation is the materiality assessment. And what materiality assessment does is look at a business impact on the stakeholders and the impact of ESG factors on the business and on its stakeholders. And that is where you prioritize what aspect of your company within E, S, and G you need to work on. And what that does is opens up opportunities for new markets to expand into existing markets, thereby increasing your top line growth. It allows you to improve your processes and thereby productivity, eventually leading into profitability if measured and done right. It also allows you huge cost reductions in terms of saving your energy, saving your utilization of your resources like water consumption, electricity consumption, transport, moving into greener modes of mobility. And finally, it also allows you to invest very strategically and very intelligently so that the return on your investment is increased or is improved. The way Jindal Steel has become the least carbon emitter company in the steel industry in the whole world can be taken as a classic case study example for specifically understanding how being sustainable actually gives you a competitive edge, improves your top line, improves your bottom line, and makes you an industry leader and not the other way around.
Thank you, Prerna, for that. Dr. Sumitra, I'd like to direct this question to you, which we got from one of our participants, who says, apart from the regulatory enforcement, is it possible to mainstream sustainability or incentivize private players to take up the right activities? In other words, can we ensure sustainability and profit levels go hand in hand?
My personal assessment, but before that, I'm sorry that I had to go offline. I think there was some network issue. So for that, I really apologize. I think personally, definitely, yes, it is possible. There are a lot of opportunities for innovation. And making available finance, actually basic reason why this ESG framework, and I think people who are following up on the subject, they know that there is this TCFD disclosure requirement, and entire regulatory authorities, they are working on bringing up some consistent framework through which industries can report. So once industries start reporting their disclosure, the very idea is that when the industry is listed in the stock market also, they're responsible to tell where do they stand in terms of their climate status, so that, investors knowingly invest. So that entire disclosure framework is coming to cover up that. So once that is taking place, then naturally the industries will be on their own. So if an industry voluntarily gives his disclosure, and his disclosure is showing that he is moving towards more carbon friendly production process or the strategies, naturally he will get better credit rating. And when you have better credit rating, you are able to generate your own resources from the financial market. So this is one way of looking into it. Another thing which we must keep in mind, I think one of the speaker, I think Ms. Prerna has mentioned that policy is not up to the mark till now. This is what I could understand. But these are gradual changes, and these are sudden changes in a way also. Because when you have to think for the entire country. There are a country like India particularly, you have real challenges for policy making. You, on the one hand, you have the most advantageous people or the industries which are very large. On the other side, there are smaller industries and disadvantaged population as well. But as a policy maker, you have to do justice to everyone. So policy making in this country is definitely not an easy task, but it happens. It happens gradually. At times, focus is, it all depends on where do you focus. Another thing, which I would like to mention here is that when we're transiting from one industry to another, we are thinking that we are moving from carbon emitting industries to carbon friendly industries. But then if we are thinking of the environment in total, say, for example, if we are moving from, say, a petrol-driven motor vehicle to an electric motor vehicle, what are we going for? This is really a food for thought. One has to think over. Because, if you are moving to the electric vehicle, you need a lot of battery. You mentioned yourself. Not only that we do not have the capacity, but one aspect of it is that, is it desirable? How environment friendly is the battery? Today the battery is good, we are using it. After a few years, we'll have to throw it. And all of us know what is the consequences, environmental consequences of batteries. So, when the business climate changes, people go by what is coming up. Everyone wants to catch that, which is important. But the thing is, we should not make a transition from one climate unfriendly industry to another so that tomorrow it becomes a bigger problem. We have plastic, we are dependent so much on plastics. Plastic has made our life very easy, but plastic has made it so difficult for the environment. So today, the innovators, the young students are here. So I would like to bring this aspect also to keep in mind, that when you are innovating, you have to think what the new material is coming at. Say, for example, even we have moved to solar panels. I had an opportunity to see in many other countries, particularly in Germany, and we are also doing that a lot. Another thing which one has to keep in mind is, are those resources available easily? If not, how do you make arrangement for it? We are thinking of moving to an option where you need specific resources. And we may not have that resources. So it will make us dependent on certain other countries or certain other location where it is available abundantly. Is that desirable? Because from economic viewpoint, you will say that we normally do not want to encourage monopolizing on anything. But there are countries or there are industries who will try to monopolize on that. So here the smaller industries will have to be very careful. What material are you choosing? What option are you moving to? Are we actually moving from a serious problem to more serious problem? So these are the things which one has to keep in mind.
Yes, I remember when we were discussing about this panel also, you mentioned that people may lose jobs or existing infrastructure for production processes will also become obsolete. So we'll have to really think about this aspect of quickly transitioning, or how in a phased manner can we do this. And I think you also addressed, one of our participants had this question, do policymakers need to take a firm stance and apply legislation to enforce sustainable growth? I think you very well addressed that question also during the course of your comments now. So thank you very much for that. I also wanted to let our panelists know that, apart from the participants of the Sustainability Challenge contest, who are young students, emerging business leaders, we also have registrations from countries like Philippines, Canada, and a lot of European countries, and participants coming from industries such as battery industry, energy industry, different industries. So they're all here and they're very excited to know about, what is the emerging trends, or, how they should grapple with the situation, because they're already in those sectors, and, they're wondering how to kind of make sense of the challenges that are posed at them while they continue to work. So another question that, was really very interesting, and I think that came from one of the participants of the case study challenge was, what should a business leader do to strike a balance between achieving high financial growth and achieving sustainable goals? And how should the mindset change? And I think that's a very interesting question, because then the mindset, then we talk about the culture, then we talk about the communication, and everything is again linked to how that leader is going to lead. Because many of you write case studies, I mean, Prerna and Namrata, and I'm sure when you present these case studies, you present it from that leader's point of view of how they lead and bring about that change. So Namrata, I'd like to direct this question to you.
That's a fascinating topic, and I've grappled with it, right? So the first book that I wrote with my co-author was called Balance, right? Because that's exactly what we were sort of grappling with, right? At that point in time, it wasn't even a must do, it was something that a company should do. But, and I came across something that Gandhiji had said a long time back. He said that a business leader should be a trustee of the environment and everything else that is entrusted to them. And if you act as a trustee and not as an owner, then you will understand that the desire to actually give back to society. So something is in trust to you, you're looking after it, and then it goes back again. So at one level, I've tried to explore that in my first book, which is called Balance, Responsible Business for the Digital Age. And the reason for getting digital and sustainability together was actually very important, because at one level, while we are transitioning our energy systems and we're talking about sustainability, the other big trend is that there are more internet users in Indian villages than in cities. Rural India has 20% more internet users than urban areas. India has surpassed every single nation, including China and the US, in digital financial transactions, right? So what is the responsibility of a technology company? A technology company does not at one level generate emissions, right? So they'll say we are a clean and we're a green organization, hamara the GHG intensity doesn't matter, we have a green building, right? But business responsibility is a very deep concept. It's a concept that says that while there are environmental issues to be looked at in terms of energy transitions, GHG, and managing of waste, utilizing of water, but since we are really accelerating towards a digital world, we are all digital people, we have huge number of devices in our homes, in our daily lives, we also need to start thinking about what does balance and responsibility mean in the digital transition. And it means many different things. It doesn't just mean looking at GHG, it means how do we manage data, how do we manage people, how do we look at people in an empathetic way. So business models for a responsible world need to look at the traditional manufacturing, which will transition, the new energy systems, as well as what does responsibility mean for a digital organization. Therefore, the concept of trusteeship, I hope I've been able to sort of answer that.
Thank you, Namrata. That was a very nice, point of view that, to be a guardian, right? To enable that attitude of saying that we care about where we operate and where we, serve the community, and we are not looking at being greedy and selfish, but rather, to leave something for the next generation and the generation after that. So I think that thought is very profound, and going back to what the father of the nation said, I think coming from him, it has such a visionary approach to thinking about where we are today, and what.
And that's the whole thing. Why should
Yeah.
all our business models be Western? Why can't we have an Indian model? And Gandhiji talked about sustainability. So did all our scriptures. If you ever read them, they all talk about living in sync with the environment. Right? We have this concept and construct that is rooted in our cultural ethos in all aspects. Praying to the trees because they were important, they were relevant. So it was not that there was a religious relevance to it, but it was just an important part of cultural ethos to look at the earth, to look at the sky, to look at the animals, to look at the trees. So I think it's time, and Deepti, you need to evolve this, create a new model.
True. I think Dr. Sumitra also had something to say on that.
Yeah, in this point, I just wanted to share this information. I'm not sure whether you have that information with you or not. In India, we have this Ministry of Corporate Affairs, and they have something called National Guidance on Responsible Business. And based on that national guidance, our Security and Exchange Board of India has now come up with a framework called Business Responsibility and Sustainable Reporting. I think that would be the correct thing. I'm not sure exactly about the name. They call it BRSR, Business Responsibility and Sustainable Reporting, most probably. So that reporting of the disclosure by companies will be based on the 9 principles. And those 9 principles have been taken from the National Guidance on Responsible Business. Now, further to it, national guidance on this responsible business has actually come from UN guidelines. UN has a guidelines. And from that guideline, this responsible concept of responsible business, initially it had started with corporate social responsibility. Then gradually it has changed to ESG. ESG is actually matching with sustainable development goals of UN. But now since private sector has to be involved, and private sector really has to participate in making this change happen. So there are issues where, the stock market and stock exchanges, everybody has to involve and come up with regulatory requirements, disclosure requirement, reporting requirement, compliance, supervision, everything will come up gradually. But what Ms. Namrata has said, that why this cannot be done, I was just thinking that I should definitely share that there is something called National Guidance on Business Responsibility. And I will encourage everybody to have a look at that.
Thank you. So I think one of the comments from our participants also very nicely resonated with what we were talking just now. And she says, as we promote consumption of local produce, does it mean we must reduce our dependence on large-scale global supply chains? So that's something that we could also ponder upon. Prerna, next question, I'll direct it at you. So you brought this up actually about this, the gender association. Is there any gender difference between how men and women approach sustainability in business? Do you see any impact there?
So Deepti, when I was working with British International Investments in the climate finance area specifically, we did a very interesting study in collaboration with the G7 Task Force and Clifford Chance, particularly specifically looking at how the finance sector takes climate considerations into account. And one aspect of what was worked upon was the response of gender and climate, or the impact of climate on gender. So there are two points to the whole process, to the challenge itself. One is, how does climate impact gender? And second is, how does gender react to climate or sustainability? So I think the dialogue on impact of climate change on gender is very prominent. It is very adversely affecting women because they rely on natural resources the most, and they will be the people who will be deprived of access to these resources or access to internal mobility or transitions. So that's clearly one. And like Namrata was also talking about the job shifts, typically in male dominated places or where there is an economic there's a demand supply gap in the number of jobs. It is always preferred and encouraged that a man takes upskills himself and the man then gets the job. It could be because of opportunities. It could be because of, say, the travel that one has to make to go and upskill themselves, which is not locally available. On the second hand, there was a very interesting study that was conducted by a US-based organization, I forget the name, where they researched 10,000 firm year, where they conducted 10,000 firm year observations. And what they found was gender diverse boards have significantly higher positive association with environmental innovations. And what this means is, if you have a gender more inclusive board, more women on your board, you might be more inclined to make decisions which are environment friendly, which are sustainable, which takes your organization to be ESG, on the path of ESG compliance or ESG trajectory. And this observation was more pronounced in less profitable firms, very counterintuitive, and in environmentally sensitive industries. So yes, women do play a role, but there is also a cognitive association of greenness and gender, which prevents more masculine entities or major shifts in men taking over responsibility for responsible consumption, responsible behavior, and green consumption, green behavior, and green purchases. So there is gender aspect on the consumer side, there's gender aspect on the producer side, and there's gender aspect on the impact side, like who gets impacted the most.
That's so interesting to know. And frankly, when I put together this panel, I never thought about it. I just thought that here were three exceptional women who are doing great work in their field. Little did I know that there was this whole science behind this, and a lot of studies have also corroborated on that. So wonderful to know that. Right. So I think we've kind of addressed most of our panelists or our participants' questions to our panelists. I mean, I'm so happy to see there's so many interesting questions, but we are running out of time. So before we wrap up, I quickly want to hand it back to my panelists to make a bit of closing comments, your take, your final words to our participants. What do you see to be the future of business leaders, and how do they negotiate? And we've used this word negotiate very strategically because we believe it's all about communicating, understanding, negotiating this term. So I would, invite Prerna first to give her closing comments before I hand it over to the other panel.
Thank you, Deepti. I think this was really fantastic to hear everybody else's views as well. And I will go back to Namrata's point on we should localize our definition of sustainability and green and adapt from our own culture. A small example of this is the per capita waste generated in India is 0.6 kg. Against a 23 kg in the United Kingdom. And you could also look at these in other countries as well. So the whole circularity is built in our culture. Sustainability is built in our culture. Now is the time to convert it into sustainable business models, be vocal about it, and communicate these in very structured formats. A simple example is once we use our t-shirts, it's no more wearable outside. We use it for cleaning our homes and dusting around, which is nothing but making sure that we reuse our waste and don't, dump it in the thing. So and there are business models, but like our, external affairs minister has very beautifully said that Indians do not market themselves and not market themselves as loudly as they should. And I think this is where there is a huge need to communicate our efforts, communicate our initiatives, and communicate our innovations while retaining our cultural modesty. So I will leave it at that build, create, innovate, and more importantly, speak about it and own your successes.
Thank you, Prerna. Namrata, over to you.
That was so wonderful, retain your cultural modesty. That was nice. but really, Prerna, you said pretty much what I would have said, and you said it even better. So I would, just like to say that as people who are looking at things and analyzing things in different ways, I think constant learning is what will drive change in organizations and in our lives. Because in a volatile environment, that's really what you need to do to survive. So there is likely to be economic volatility, there will be job shifts, there will be transitions, there will be new innovations that may scale very rapidly, and we may perhaps not know what to do with them. But if you are constantly learning, constantly adapting, constantly trying and figuring out where you are in the ecosystem, you will land on your feet. And that is what I would like to leave all of you with as my closing thoughts.
Thank you, Namrata. Dr. Sumitra, are you able to hear us?
Really sorry, I think there is some problem with the connection. It's going
No, you can continue.
Actually, I really enjoyed this discussion. It's a very useful topic for us to learn from others as well. To me, change is always good, and change gives us the opportunity to make disruptions as well. So as youngsters are here in this group who are listening to us, I would encourage them to, think about disruptions, making disruptions. This is an opportunity where you can disrupt and you can bring up a new model. If you look at the economic history of the past few years, maybe 2-3 decades, you will see that most of the even developed countries have reached kind of a saturation. So that means the given development model has reached its saturation. So this gives an opportunity for businesses as well as for everyone, to think about disruption. So that is what I would encourage everybody to get into, bring about innovation, bring about revolutionary thoughts, where you can think of an alternative development models, because the current development model is running for many years. And I think there is an opportunity to come with a new development model. And above all, what is important is what we are doing here right now is sharing. More knowledge and experience is shared. It really generates a lot of, it actually percolates down to every level. And that is what can bring about the new change. I'm always hopeful of the changes. And I think this is also giving us an opportunity to think of a change which will disrupt our existing development model. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, the wonderful panelists. And as you can see, our participants also have thanked everyone. They're saying it's a very well organized and informative session. I'm glad, our conversation could help you to figure out this conundrum that is facing all of us, and that you can think and ponder upon what the panelists talked about and implement it as soon as you can in your own personal and professional lives. Thanks again to my wonderful panelists for taking time out on a valuable Saturday evening and, taking time out to come and speak to us. Thanks a lot and have a good weekend. And thank you so much for being a part of this speaker series. Thank you.